They posted the group photo at exactly 7:03 p.m. on a Saturday. There it was. The familiar long table at Maison Belle. White linens, wine glasses mid-toast, and 20-something faces flushed with laughter. My face wasn't one of them. My name is Charlotte. I'm 35 years old and live in Portland. I'm a pastry chef. And not just any pastry chef. I've spent the last decade building a name in this industry. I've been to every single alumni banquet since graduating from l'École de Cuisine in Paris. Every year I closed the restaurant early, flew out, and wore the same vintage navy dress my grandmother once wore to her engagement party. It was tradition, my tradition. I sat frozen on my couch, still wearing my flour-dusted apron, staring at the Instagram story of a classmate I hadn't spoken to in months. Reunion vibes, it read, in pink cursive font across the image. I tapped back, then forward. There were clips of everyone clinking glasses, hugging, dancing to a live-string quartet. Pascal was there, my old mentor. He had a glass of champagne in one hand and a bright smile that made my chest tighten. I hadn't been invited. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a last-minute gathering. Maybe they assumed I wouldn't come. Maybe my invite got lost. Spam folder, wrong address, anything. But then I checked the school's alumni page. They had posted about it for weeks. I scrolled through 3 posts, each one with more details. The seating chart, the chef they hired, the intimate gathering of select graduates. I wasn't just left out. I was deliberately cut. I replayed all the years I'd flown back early just to help Pascal prep appetizers before banquets. How I always brought a box of handmade truffles for the staff. The times I stayed up emailing advice to students preparing for internships. The recipe swaps. The care packages. The time I mailed almond flour from Portland to Paris because the student kitchen had run out. I wasn't just a face in the crowd. I was part of the foundation, or at least, I thought I was. A couple hours later, I got a voice message from Pascal. His tone was warm, almost apologetic. "Charlotte, ma chérie," he began. "The banquet was more intimate this year, smaller. We didn't want to overwhelm with press or high-profile names. We assumed you'd be swamped, Michelin pursuits and all. You understand, yes?" No, I didn't understand. They had assumed I was too busy, too famous, too important to care. And just like that, they had cut me out of something I cherished, something I helped keep alive. I played the message twice, then once more. I listened to Pascal's soft sigh at the end, the way he paused before saying goodbye, like he knew it might not be well received. It wasn't. I sat in my kitchen, hands in my lap, staring at the rolling pin on the counter. For the first time in years, I felt like I didn't belong in either world. Not the high society chefs who watched my every move for inspiration, and not the classmates who now treated me like a brand, rather than a person. That night, I didn't bake. I didn't write recipes. I didn't post on my channel. I just sat there, wondering when the people I loved decided I no longer fit at the table. The first smell I remember is cinnamon. Not the kind from a plastic shaker, but the real stuff. Raw sticks boiled in cream, rolled in sugar, steeped in oatmeal. I grew up in a kitchen, not the modern kind with quartz countertops and sous vide gadgets, but an old Vermont inn tucked behind a row of white pines in Stowe, with wood floors that creaked under every step and walls stained slightly yellow from decades of steam and butter. That kitchen was my first school. My grandmother Ingrid ran it like a warship. No shortcuts, no substitutions. Cooking is love, not competition, she'd say, flicking my wrist with the back of a wooden spoon if I rushed through folding batter or grated the cheddar too fine. She was tall, square-shouldered, and wore her apron like a uniform. She never used a timer. Said you could tell a roast was done by how the smell changed, how it sweetened just slightly, like the meat was sighing. I believed her. I still do. My parents helped run the inn. My dad handled bookings. My mom did the linens and guest room turnovers. Every morning, we'd rise at 5. By 5:30, the scent of herbs, warm bread, and dark coffee filled the downstairs hall. The locals came in not just for the food, but for my grandmother's quiet scowl and the thick slices of maple cornbread that always landed just right on your plate. By the time I was 9, I could knead dough with one hand and flip omelets with the other. I was good at it, maybe too good. Charlotte's got Ingrid's hands, folks used to say, like it was a birthright. It made me proud, but also trapped. There was an unspoken plan for me. I was supposed to stay, take over the inn, marry someone local, raise kids who'd grow up folding napkins and pouring orange juice into mason jars, just like I did. It wasn't a bad life. It just wasn't mine. I wanted more, not better, just more. I started sketching desserts in a notebook I kept hidden under the flower bins. I imagined towers of spun sugar and plates that looked like abstract paintings. I borrowed books from the town library, copied recipes from old French cookbooks, and watched grainy online videos when I thought no one was looking. When I learned about a patisserie in Paris that trained world-class chefs, I bookmarked it and read every line of the application. And then I applied, in secret. When the envelope came, thick, cream-colored, with the school seal pressed into the flap, I felt both terrified and alive. I opened it on the back steps behind the kitchen, next to the compost bins. I still remember the words, "Nous sommes ravis de vous accueillir." I didn't tell anyone for a week. When I finally did, my parents didn't yell. They just looked at each other like someone had died. My mother set her teacup down and said, "You don't need to go across the ocean to learn how to feed people. You already know how." My father added, "And who's going to take over the inn?" But the hardest part was Ingrid. She didn't say a word at first, just stirred the biscuit dough a little harder than usual. Then finally she said, "All that showy food on TV, it's not about people, it's about ego." I didn't argue, I just stood there and nodded. But inside, I was already gone. When I left for Paris, only my younger cousin came to see me off at the airport. No hugs, no packed lunches, just silence. I didn't cry until the plane took off. I remember looking out the window, watching the Vermont hills disappear below the clouds, and thinking, they think I'm leaving home, but I think I'm finally finding it. The first job I got in Paris was peeling potatoes. Not the glamorous kind either, not fingerlings or heirlooms or anything trendy. Bulk sacks of waxy yellows in the basement kitchen of a brasserie that reeked of bleach and duck fat. I stood on cracked tile for 12-hour shifts, fingers raw, wrists aching. The sous chef called me Vermont, never Charlotte, and once threw a paring knife past my head because I left the skins too thick. I stayed. I learned. I kept my mouth shut and showed up early every morning, soaking up every bit of knowledge I could find. I watched pastry chefs craft lemon tarts so delicate they looked like glass. I studied sauces. I scrubbed pans until my fingers cracked open. And slowly, I moved up. By the time I turned 29, I had landed in Portland, working at a quiet little spot tucked in the Pearl District. Within a year, the quiet little spot wasn't so quiet anymore. Our dessert menu was being photographed, tweeted, picked apart by critics. My millefeuille made it onto a cover spread. My lavender shortbread was called Transcendent in Bon Appetit. I didn't mean for any of it to happen like that. I just kept baking. I kept experimenting. I poured my weird, stubborn heart into every plated dessert that left my hands. And people noticed. Eventually, I was offered the executive pastry position at Savin, a modern French-Japanese fusion restaurant that boasted a vertical herb wall and more awards than it had tables. It felt surreal, being the one to write the menu, lead the kitchen, mentor others. I hired 2 young pastry interns who reminded me of myself at 21, overly eager, terrified of messing up. I didn't throw knives at them, I taught them. Then came the YouTube channel. At first, it was just a way to answer the endless questions I got on Instagram about technique, ingredients, substitutions. But it grew. People responded to the honesty, the mess, the fact that I didn't dress like a TV chef or talk like a textbook. I filmed from my tiny apartment kitchen with a cheap tripod and a tea towel over the window for light diffusion. The first video to go viral was me failing, burning honey brittle and swearing under my breath. The next day, I had 10,000 new subscribers. Still, I sent holiday baskets home every year. Salted caramels, rosemary crackers, hand-rolled truffles. I wrote handwritten notes on thick parchment. My mother would text a polite thank you. My dad would sometimes forget to mention it. I visited Vermont once or twice a year, always bringing extra for the neighbors. But the house didn't smell like cinnamon anymore, not like it used to. Ingrid would eye my boxes of sweets with cool amusement. All that fuss over puff pastry, she'd mutter, poking at a box of laminated croissants like they were science experiments. Are you feeding people or entertaining them? I'd laugh it off, every time, but the truth stung. I was finally doing what I'd set out to do. I had built something from nothing. But back in the house where it all began, I felt like a visitor, a guest in my own story. And deep down, I wondered if they'd ever stopped seeing me as the girl who left. The morning after I saw the banquet photos, I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't open the shop early. I just stood in my kitchen, staring at the empty stainless steel counter like it had betrayed me. By noon, I was elbow-deep in choux pastry. Baking has always been how I process. I don't scream. I don't throw things. I weigh, I sift, I fold. That day, I made 6 trays of pâte à choux, perfect little domes that I filled with hazelnut praline cream and topped with glistening chocolate glaze. I didn't know what I was doing with them. I just needed to make something that wouldn't disappoint me. Around 3, I poured myself a coffee I didn't touch and finally pulled out my phone. I scrolled through old photos. The first banquet in Paris, where we wore aprons and big dreams and clinked plastic wine cups like they were crystal. The second year, when I brought lemon tarts in a crushed box because TSA didn't know what to do with a pastry box from Oregon. The year I gave Pascal the antique copper sugar mold I found in a flea market in Lyon. I watched a video from 5 years ago. Us all laughing in the school kitchen. Someone off camera daring me to balance a sablé on my nose. I had frosting in my hair and a look on my face I barely recognized now. That girl still thought everyone in that room wanted her to win. I stared at that paused frame and felt something slip. After a few more hours of pacing, baking, and ignoring texts, I did the one thing I shouldn't have done. I called Camille. She and I were close back in school, roommates during our internship year. She still sent me Christmas cards, still tagged me in baking memes once in a while. She answered on the second ring. Char? Hey, I said. You have a second? Of course. She hesitated. This is about the banquet, isn't it? I didn't even try to play dumb. I just want to know, was I forgotten? Camille was quiet for too long. Then, you weren't forgotten. I let that sink in. I had hoped for a mistake, a lost invitation, anything but this. So it was intentional. Pascal didn't want it to be complicated, she said slowly. He thought your presence might overshadow things. Some people felt like you've changed. Changed how? Like maybe you're more of a brand now than part of the family. She rushed to add, I don't agree with it. But I think they liked you better before you were, Charlotte. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Too commercial, I said. I'm sorry, she whispered. It wasn't fair. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went to the garden and pulled weeds until my hands cramped. The next week, I canceled 2 appearances. I skipped a food competition I had been judging for 3 years. I stopped posting on my YouTube channel. I didn't make a big announcement. I just went quiet. And in that quiet, I found something I hadn't had in years. Solitude. I started planting more, testing recipes without filming them, baking for no one. It was the loneliest I'd felt in a long time. But it also felt like finally, no one was watching. And maybe that was the point. It was a rainy Thursday in October. The kind of Portland day where the air smells like wet cedar and you can't tell if it's still morning or already evening. I had just finished prepping for that night's community class, a new thing we'd started in the back room of the shop. 12 people of all ages, learning to make galettes from scratch, while jazz hummed softly from the corner speaker. I was piping rose lavender cream into eclairs when the bell above the front door jingled. I didn't look up right away. Danny, my assistant, popped her head into the kitchen. You've got visitors. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stepped out. And there they were, Chef Pascal, Camille, André, and someone I didn't recognize, a young woman with a notepad and a sleek trench coat that probably cost more than my oven. Pascal spread his arms like we were long-lost friends. Charlotte, ma belle. I stared at them for a beat, then offered a small smile. Didn't expect to see you here, he chuckled. We didn't want to interrupt, but we were in town and, well, we had to stop by. Look at this place. He gestured dramatically at the bakery. It's beautiful. It smells like heaven. Camille gave me a soft, guilty smile. André walked toward the display case, practically drooling over the lemon thyme tarts. The young woman introduced herself. a junior editor from Modern Gastronomy. I nodded politely. You really built something incredible, Camille said. The oven, the studio kitchen, the garden boxes outside. It's all you. Pascal walked toward the brick oven, placing a hand reverently on the edge like it was some kind of relic. These eclairs, he said, holding one up from the sample tray. Light as air, this rose lavender cream. Subtle, elegant, complex. You've elevated rustic into art. Thank you, I said carefully, not sure what was happening, but knowing it wasn't just a social call. They hovered, complimented the tiles, the layout, the community class posters, the French press on the counter. I waited. Finally, Pascal cleared his throat. There's something we need to tell you. I folded my arms. Go ahead. He looked around as if he needed permission from the walls before speaking. There was an incident at the school. The old kitchen, the original one, the one we trained in. It burned down. Electrical fire. Total loss. I blinked. When? 6 weeks ago, Camille chimed in. It's been all over the French press, but I wasn't sure if you saw. I hadn't. I'd muted everything related to the school after the banquet. Andre stepped in. The board is scrambling. There's an international showcase coming up, a centennial event that was supposed to take place in that kitchen. Students from 5 countries, press, donors, alumni. It's a huge deal. The young editor added, it's being covered by multiple food media outlets, live-streamed, reviewed, judged. It's basically a culinary Super Bowl. Pascal placed his eclair down gently, like it suddenly had weight. We need a new venue, something beautiful, unique, with pedigree. And there it was. Camille's voice softened. We came here because we think this could be the place. I stared at her. You didn't invite me to the alumni banquet, I said, keeping my tone even. But now you want me to host your showcase? Pascal had the decency to look sheepish. We didn't handle that well, I admit. But Charlotte, you've created something remarkable. This isn't just about convenience. It's about honoring excellence. Excellence you excluded, I said, my voice sharp now. The room went quiet. Even the steady tap of rain outside seemed to pause. I didn't say anything else, just let them sit in it. Because they didn't come for the eclairs. They came because the kitchen they once said I didn't belong in had burned down. And now they needed mine. I made tea, mostly to keep my hands busy. We sat in the sunroom behind the bakery, a small space filled with potted herbs and the scent of cardamom and honey that always seemed to linger, no matter what was brewing. Pascal took the striped armchair. Camille and Andre shared the bench by the window. The junior editor, still scribbling in her notepad, perched on the edge of her seat like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to be there at all. I placed a tray between us, lavender macarons, orange blossom madeleines, and delicate lemon bars with candied thyme. Pascal took a macaron and sighed like it was spiritual. My dear Charlotte, he began, voice syrupy. You've become everything we dreamed a student of ours might become. I stayed quiet. You are, he continued, a symbol now, an emblem of what our institution can produce. When people see you, they see us. I raised an eyebrow. That's funny. I didn't feel very symbolic when you left me off the banquet list. Camille gave an awkward laugh. It wasn't personal. It was a misunderstanding. The event came together quickly. Small venue, limited space. We assumed that I was too busy, I cut in, echoing Pascal's voicemail from 3 months ago. He leaned forward, hands clasped. We were trying to be considerate. With your schedule, your Michelin work, your content channel. We didn't want to burden you. Right, I said slowly. So you left me out. For my own convenience. Andre jumped in. Charlotte, come on. It wasn't meant with any ill intent. You've always done things your own way. Some people just didn't know where you fit anymore. I stared at him. You mean some people didn't like that I stopped needing permission? Silence. I sipped my tea. Let it sit heavy in the room. Pascal cleared his throat. Charlotte, we're not here to revisit old misunderstandings. We're here because we respect what you've built. This kitchen, your brand, your reach, it's extraordinary, truly. I looked around at my sunroom, the shelves lined with dog-eared cookbooks, the tea steeper dripping quietly into its dish. Nothing here was flashy, nothing was branded. It was just mine. I remember when I brought you my pear ginger creme brulee recipe in school, I said, staring at Pascal. You said it was too trendy. too soft. That fusion was for people who couldn't master tradition. That was years ago, he said quickly. You were still developing. And when I started the YouTube channel, you told me it was a little too casual for someone with my training. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. We were cautious. No, I said calmly. You were dismissive. I stood and began clearing the tray. This kitchen wasn't built with your approval. It was built in spite of it. They all looked at me, eyes shifting, polite smiles faltering. I'm proud of what I've made, I added, looking directly at Pascal. But don't rewrite history to make it sound like you always believed in it. Pascal tried to recover, gesturing around the room. Still, it's incredible. A testament to your talent and to where you came from. I met his gaze. Where I came from was a kitchen that didn't think I deserved a seat. This time, no one argued. The pleasantries didn't last long. After a few more sips of tea and half-hearted compliments about my use of bee pollen in the Madeleines, the energy in the room shifted. Pascal leaned forward in his chair like he was about to deliver something profound, resting his elbows on his knees. There's something else, he said, voice dropping a shade. We need to be honest about the stakes. Here it comes, I thought. The school is struggling, he continued. The fire was a blow, yes. But the truth is, enrollment has dropped. Our sponsorships have dried up. We're not just looking for a place to host the showcase. We're looking to preserve what's left of the school's legacy. The editor chimed in, her voice low but rehearsed. Your kitchen would give us credibility, visibility, press, donor attention, everything we need to stabilize our footing. I let that sit. Camille added softly, it would mean a lot to the students, having the showcase here, with you. It would send a message that innovation and tradition can exist together. I nodded slowly. So you want my space, my food, my brand, and my story. They all exchanged glances, the way people do when they're hoping you'll say yes before they have to ask for too much. And I assume, I said, still calm, you're offering a full rental fee for the space, plus cost of staff and product. Pascal hesitated. Well, that's the thing. We were hoping. That I'd donate it, I said flatly. A gesture of gratitude, the editor offered quickly. For everything the school gave you, for launching you on this path. My jaw tightened. Gratitude, I repeated. Pascal leaned in, sensing the tone but pushing anyway. Charlotte, we understand you've distanced yourself, but think of what this could do. Think of your impact. You'd be giving students the chance to see where passion can lead. I put my tea down. Let me get this straight, I said. You excluded me from a celebration of the school's finest because I was too commercial, too big, too loud. Then you show up months later because the kitchen burned down, and now suddenly, I'm your legacy project? It's not like that, Camille whispered. It's exactly like that, I said. You didn't just overlook me, you dismissed me, silenced me. And now that I have something you need, you expect me to donate it back, for free, to make you look good. Charlotte. No, I snapped, standing now. I spent years proving myself to you, fighting to be taken seriously, learning to survive in rooms that weren't built for me. I built this kitchen with my own 2 hands. I funded it with long hours, creative risk, and every ounce of stubbornness you used to mock. They were quiet. I owe you nothing, I said. Pascal tried again, quieter this time. This isn't about ego. It's about legacy. Don't you care what you leave behind? I stared at him. I do, I said, which is exactly why I'm not handing it over to people who only show up when they're desperate. And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving them to sit in the silence they'd earned. That evening, I didn't want to be alone. The sun had dipped behind the evergreens, casting that dim golden haze through the kitchen windows. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving and texted 2 of my sous chefs, Matteo and Liv, to come by for dinner. I also reached out to Jean-Luc, my old mentor from Paris, now retired and living up the coast. He'd always made time for me when things got loud. I needed that kind of quiet now. They showed up an hour later with fresh herbs, garden tomatoes, and a hunk of sourdough. No one asked questions at first. We cooked together, a simple meal, frittata with chèvre, roasted fennel, and tomato salad tossed in lemon oil. The food came out effortlessly, the way it always does when you're feeding people who don't need to be impressed. It wasn't until we were halfway through our second glasses of wine that Matteo broke the silence. So, he said gently, what happened? I told them everything. I walked them through the visit, Pascal, the flattery, the ask, how they danced around the truth, trying to wrap their desperation in a ribbon of compliments, how they tried to turn my years of exile into a victory lap for them. Liv shook her head. The audacity. Jean-Luc leaned back, arms crossed. Ah, oui. Institutions. They love you when you reflect them, fear you when you don't. I nodded. They said the students needed me, that it would be a legacy moment. Jean-Luc met my eyes. Legacy is not about pleasing ghosts. It's about building something the living can grow into. That hit me in the chest. For a while, no one spoke. The candles flickered on the table, shadows playing across the tile. I stared down at my plate, pushing a roasted fennel bulb across it with my fork. I think, I said finally, they liked me better when I was smaller, when I needed their approval. Liv leaned forward. What they called selfishness, she said, was you refusing to stay small. The words cracked something open. I felt it in my chest. Not quite grief, not quite anger. Something messier. Sadness with a sharp edge. I wanted to be included, I said. That's what hurts the most. Not even the ask. Just the way they made me feel like I had to earn my place. Again. You don't, Matteo said. Not anymore. I nodded slowly. After they left, I walked back into the kitchen, still warm from dinner, and pulled my laptop from the drawer by the espresso machine. I opened a new video script and titled it, When Exclusion Becomes a Gift. For the next hour, I wrote, not just about what happened, but what it meant, about how growth sometimes looks like distance, about how sometimes silence from your past isn't rejection, it's freedom. And I decided I was done shrinking to fit. The next morning was bright and crisp, a rarity in Portland's long gray fall. I opened the shop early, hands steady, as I prepped citrus scones for the case and lit the oven with a flick of muscle memory. I thought about the meeting from the night before, Jean-Luc's words, Liv's clarity, Matteo's quiet loyalty. I felt something I hadn't in months, sure of myself. At 9 sharp, Pascal and the others returned. Pascal wore a tailored blazer now, like he thought I'd be more agreeable if he dressed for diplomacy. Camille looked hopeful, maybe even a little nervous. The editor had a notepad again, already half-filled. We met in the front room. I didn't bother with tea this time. They smiled too quickly. We've been talking, Pascal began, smoothing his lapel, and we really think this could be a win-win. We're working on language for a joint press release, something that honors your success and the school's legacy at the same time. Camille nodded eagerly. There could be a feature article, press across the board, and maybe even a scholarship in your name. I held up a hand. I've made my decision, I said calmly. They fell quiet. This space, I gestured around the bakery, was built for creativity, for community, for people who believe in showing up before they ask for favors. The editor blinked. So, is that a no? It's a no. Pascal's brow furrowed. Charlotte, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You ignored me when I was inconvenient. You left me out when I no longer fit your idea of humble. And now that the school is in trouble, suddenly I'm worthy again. Not because of who I am, but because of what I've built. Camille shifted in her seat. But the school needs you. No, I said, voice clear and steady. It needs what I built. After years of being told I wouldn't make it, wouldn't last, wouldn't matter. Pascal opened his mouth to argue, but I beat him to it. I won't help you rewrite the story to make everyone more comfortable. I spent too long being polite, too long hoping for a seat at your table. I have my own now, and it's full. Silence stretched between us, awkward and heavy. You're making a mistake, the editor muttered. No, I said, gently but firmly. I'm correcting one. They stood slowly. Camille gave me a look that almost bordered on apology, but she didn't speak. Pascal seemed stunned, like the word no had never actually landed on him before. When they left, I watched through the window as they disappeared down the sidewalk, heads bowed, voices low. It didn't feel triumphant, but it felt honest. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval to keep moving forward. 3 months later, the bakery hummed with life. The garden out back had grown wild in the best way. Rows of nasturtiums and lemon balm reaching toward the sun, fig trees bending gently with ripened fruit. We started calling the space the table, not officially, but that's what it had become. A place to gather, to eat, to share ideas, not to impress. No press releases, no legacy speeches. Just people, local chefs, home cooks, students with flour on their aprons and ideas in their notebooks. I hosted open houses every quarter, each one a little different. Sourdough labs, foraging walks, chocolate tempering over camp stoves. Some nights we watched food documentaries in the garden, sipping chamomile wine and passing around baskets of rosemary flatbread. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. Sophia had flown in from Lyon to visit that summer. My old roommate, my midnight croissant-making partner during school. Now a successful restaurant owner in Marseille. She stayed 2 weeks and cooked beside me like no time had passed. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. She helped me plant elderflower and made herbed chèvre that sold out in a day. We didn't talk much about Pascal, or the banquet, or any of that. We didn't need to. Instead, we planned a collaborative pop-up series, her savory, my sweet. La table libre, we called it. The free table, then came the postcards. 3 in total, each hand-addressed and sent from 3 different cities. The first was from Camille. It was short. A quiet apology. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. You didn't deserve that. No excuses. Just honesty. The second was from André. Longer, more reflective. He wrote about fear, of being left behind, of not measuring up, of following Pascal's lead because it felt safer than speaking his own truth. He ended it with, "You were right to walk away." The third surprised me most. Pascal's handwriting was unmistakable. Neat, slanted, measured. He didn't apologize directly, but the message was clear. I've been thinking a lot about how legacy can rot from the inside if it's built on exclusion. I hope your kitchen keeps growing, even if it didn't grow in my direction. I stared at that line for a long time. I didn't respond to his postcard. I didn't need to. But I did reply to Camille and André. I kept it short, kind, but clear. We can reconnect, but I'm no longer asking for a seat at anyone else's table. If you'd like to join mine, it's open. Just bring something honest. That Sunday, we hosted another open house. Sophia and I made fig and honey galettes with rosemary crusts. Unpretentious, but exquisite. We served them warm from the oven while local jazz musicians played in the garden. I looked around and saw people talking, cooking, laughing, passing bowls, sharing stories about their grandmother's soup, their first kitchen burns, their latest recipe flops. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't formal, but it was real. As I slid the last galette into the oven, the scent of butter and caramelized figs filling the room, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not bitterness, not pride, peace. This was my kind of kitchen table, and finally, it felt full.